Catus Maximus here again, this time just with a quick and easy video about one-handed hacksaws and utility saws. Some of these actually will take reciprocating saw blades, Milwaukee Sawzall saw blades. I use that as an example of a reciprocating saw, but standard half-inch tang with through-hole blades. So I kind of label those as utility. And the purpose of this saw is just to compare a few different types of one-handed hacksaws and utility saws, and to bring awareness of these tools, which are actually not that common. They're not really seen in stores very often, but surprisingly enough can be quite handy in a variety of situations. We'll go ahead and start off with the one-handed hacksaws. I have a few different Stanley versions, actually 3 of them, and we have some different generations and styles. We have what I believe to be an early one. It has this nice large, kind of soft, I would say it's like a vinyl, solid vinyl handle. It's not an overmold. The whole handle is made out of it, and it does have a little bit of softness. And it's not too bad ergonomics, although the diameter is pretty large. And so this is just to show a variety of handle sizes. I believe this is an older one because they just have 2 screws holding the head onto the handle. And they must have had some type of issues because more recent versions, they actually use 4 screws to hold the head onto the handle. So I do like that. This one right here actually is overmolded. There's a hard plastic and then 2 layers of what I would call Plastidip. And this one's a little bit smaller, offers nice texturing and grip, and is a little bit easier to use. These things are just super simple. This one has a Phillips. Most of them actually use a slot head, so it's easy for you to use like a dime or a small coin to tighten and loosen the screw, and they're just real basic. You just take the blade. They have a little metal shim inside there so that the screw isn't screwing directly into the side of the blade. It's giving it a bit more surface area to also hold the blade. A little fidgety to get the blade in there sometimes, but you just put in the blade. This one's this blade's broken, but you could push it all the way back to the back end of the handle or extend it out as far as you need. Tighten down the screw, and then you have a very compact hacksaw for certain situations where you just can't really reach with any other kind of saw. You can get into a real tight spot and hacksaw or cut whatever you need to cut. Now, one thing about these squared off handles is they are a little more comfortable, a little larger to hold, like this, and like this one, which is ovalized. The issue kind of comes in when you need to be in an awkward angle, say at a upwards 45-degree angle. Then it can be increasingly difficult to really have a good purchase, a really good and comfortable grip. And that's why I like these thinner handle, this one that's rounded. This is an older American-made unit. Even this popular mechanics one's American-made, which is surprising. But this round handle one, I do like it better than the others. And as you can see, I've actually used it more often just because it's easier for you to adjust whatever angle that you need to be sawing at. The round handle makes it just as comfortable regardless of what position you're holding it in. And surprisingly enough, small things like that make a difference in the usability of tools. We also have what I call our short beam one-handed hacksaws. We have a poor quality unit here, this Taiwanese, and this would be an example of one of the most basic forms of one-handed, what I consider supported. This just has a plastic slip-on cover over a metal tube, and then these 2 arms are secured inside there. This, you would just take the blade and you would insert it like so. Sometimes it's a little fidgety. You do something like that and then tighten down this screw. And these don't work very well just because how tight you have to make the screw in order to get this to hold, because it's just pinching the blade just right there, right at the very end. 2 small tabs of metal is all that's holding it. But the purpose of these is kind of the same as this, except for it has a little arm, so it's giving you a little more blade support where you need a compact one-handed saw, but you do want to have a blade that's just a little bit more secure and you're not so worried about it flopping around, because hacksaw blades are pretty thin. They're designed to be held in tension via 2 posts, as in my previous video of regular hacksaws. So this style does make them a little bit more usable when you're just doing small little cut-off operations, but you can be more aggressive because of how well that supports it. A more premium version of one of those would be the Sandvik 208. It's one of my few Swedish-made tools. You don't see a lot of Swedish-made tools, but they are pretty nice. This one's much better quality. As we can see, it's a die-cast aluminum, all metal construction. And it has an inherently different method of securing the blade. In this, what we have is a roll pin, and what I like about that is since the blade teeth are actually getting locked up by that roll pin, and inevitably it will wear out, and it's super easy just to press out and replace with another one. It has a thumb screw, and what this thumb screw has, which I thought was also a good idea, is it has a very hard steel ball bearing in it, and so that ball bearing is actually what's pressing onto the back of the blade, kind of creating a little indent or detent, I shouldn't say detent, but indent in the back of the blade, and really does hold it securely. So this style, you just take the blade and you just slide it in like so. The blade teeth do kind of want to catch. It does have a pass-through on the back of the handle, although there's a little bit of flashing, a little bit of burrs, so that does need to be cleaned up on this unit. But what that allows you to do is, say, use one portion of the blade and then pull it out and use another portion of the blade. But this is how this unit works. You just would put on the blade, make sure it sits in the little fork in the front, and then you just tighten down this thumb screw and it holds it real well. The blade does not slip because the way the ball bearing is creating a little indent on the back, securely grabbing it, as well as the teeth kind of biting into this roll pin. So this has a very solid securement of the blade, and so this is what a heavier duty style one of these would make. I would have to say though that this thing probably weighs 3 times as much as this. And in certain situations you can even grab up here and use 2 hands with it. And I really do like that. These things sometimes really are handy just to grab a hacksaw to do a small cut-off operation without having that, a big old saw. We also have a couple different styles which I think are great. The reason I think these styles are great is because they use reciprocating saw blades, and the 2 distinct advantages of reciprocating saw blades over hacksaw blades in many operations is, 1, you have a variety of blade lengths and a huge variety of different blade styles. Also, the blades can be much thicker, much heavier duty than any hacksaw blade will ever be. Something like this Milwaukee 12-inch axe demolition blade is incredibly thick, really. It's like a 1/16 of an inch thick. This is a real solid piece of steel, and having this in a one-handed saw means you can be as aggressive as you want to, and you don't have to worry about the blade. I have a pruning blade in this one. One of my criticisms of pruning blades is they always seem to bend so darn easily. But if you just need to trim a couple simple little old branches or something, and you don't want to bring out a bow saw or any other number of saws, and maybe it's a harder wood, so you don't want to punish a set of pruners, you can just put in a pruning blade on this Popular Mechanics. It is made in America. And voila, you have a nice 12-inch long one-handed pruning saw. Pretty darn handy. And this one works pretty easily as well. It's actually pretty nice. It has a machined steel thumb screw, and the blade pops out. This little piece on top actually has a little detent in it. Not a detent, but a little post that attaches to the through hole of the reciprocating saw blade, so you don't have to worry about it slipping out. Pretty heavy, pretty well built, surprisingly enough. And what I mean by a variety of blades is there's just a huge variety of different reciprocating saw blades that you can get and use. If you want to do heavy-duty metal cutting one-handed, you can get a blade like this, and this will outperform any hacksaw blade, at least in one-handed use. We'll finish up this review with this MXZ, which is I consider the next evolution in utility saws that use half-inch tang reciprocating saw blades. This is a folding version. It has a lock, and it locks in actually 3 positions. You have this angle, so the handle is at, I would say, 45 degrees from straight, and so that allows you to get a lot of downward force and also a lot of pulling force. And it has nice finger cutouts. It also will lock into the straight position. One thing, and it's pretty rare, but occasionally people have had to use hacksaws to cut things overhead where a reciprocating saw just won't fit. And what I like is this will actually go all the way back like this. So even on an overhead cut, you can actually do it with a reasonable amount of effort, not an unreasonable amount of effort. You're not trying to struggle with a straight blade trying to push up into it. The blade's now at 90 degrees, and so you can really force your way against the cut and even use two hands to make the overhead cut. It's the only type of utility knife of this style that has had that kind of capability, and I've actually really appreciated it. I believe it is either die-cast zinc or die-cast aluminum, but it's not too bad. It's fairly well made. It operates pretty smoothly. You just got to put a little oil into it. It's actually really easy to replace the blade in this because you have a nice large metal thumb screw, and then the blade pops out. There is a little, well, I'll pull the thumb screw off here, and there's a little detent, or excuse me, a little boss there that holds the blade. That could wear off after quite a bit of heavy use, but what's nice about this is you can disassemble it, drill that out, and then put in a steel post. So it is repairable, and I did appreciate that, just due to that probably was not intentional, but realizing that you could fix it if it ever wore out, or preemptively just replace that peg with a steel post so you never have to worry about it. One final thing that I did like about this, and we'll put in this big Milwaukee blade, is, yeah, it's a little ridiculous to think that you're going to use this blade. You're not going to go cutting out walls using this blade in a hand knife. It could physically be done, but you might be there a while. But what I did appreciate about the design of this is there may be situations you may use one of these axe blades, but to cut a hole in the drywall, maybe through both sides of a wall, and so it just makes it nice and easy when you just need to do a small hole by hand. Instead of bringing out the power saw and its fans and blowing a bunch of dust everywhere, you can just do it calmly and quietly with a handsaw. And when you're done with it, even though this blade is obviously way too big for the tool, I thought it was smart of them to include an additional cutout so that it could be folded closed, even though you may have a blade that's too long. And I appreciate that because Sawzall or reciprocating saw blades usually are 6, 9, and 12 inches. Sometimes there's some real short 4-inch ones, but they're not always perfectly sized. And so if you have a blade that maybe sticks out a little bit too much, it will still fold into the locking position. There may be also a situation where you may want to hold it like this. I'm not exactly sure what that would be, but it does allow you the opportunity. And with these wood cutting blades, what this does is it turns it into basically a one-handed saw, not just hacksaw, but just a general utility saw. Depending on the blade, you can use it to cut a variety of things. If you just need to cut off a small piece of wood, this would be great. And even versus a normal handsaw, you have this, you can put it in this first position, have this steep angle where you're kind of pulling down and back at the same time, so you actually get a pretty aggressive cut, and it works pretty well. I've always really liked this just because I can just use these Sawzall blades and have a bunch of different saws in one single unit. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this review and comparison of one-handed hacksaws and utility saws. I really appreciate everybody who's been subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to the Catus Maximus channel. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.